Be careful where you explore. When my older sister and I decided to explore an old, abandoned building in my hometown, I honestly wasn't scared at all. My sister is a dedicated believer in all things paranormal, ghosts, demons, the whole 9 yards. I, on the other hand, am a big-time skeptic. However, I do enjoy freaking myself out. So I took it upon myself to find some kind of abandoned building to explore, which is something I had been wanting to do for a while. I don't know what I expected going into this building. Maybe we'd find some cool graffiti or remnants of the previous owners. What I didn't expect was the horrid sense of dread I felt when I first stepped foot into the decrepit, decaying 2-story brick house. As we walked around, our flashlights, our only source of light in the dark, dead night, we saw things in the corner of our eyes. But they were gone before we could fully turn our heads to see them. It was always seemed as if there was a third pair of footsteps that would continue to walk for a second after we would stop. Curious as to who may be behind us, what I really didn't expect was to run out of the house, a scream escaping my lips as I felt a strong gust of wind in my hair as a voice whispered my name right into my ear. I was planning on staying with my sister that night, but I couldn't even stand the thought of staying in the same town as whatever was back in that house. I lived the next town over, so I decided to go home. As I pulled out of my sister's driveway, I reached down to turn on the radio, deciding that music is the best thing to calm me down right now. However, as it turned on, all there was static before shutting off completely. That's odd. But I do drive an almost 20-year-old car, so it's likely just wiring issues. I started my 45-minute drive to my house, and I grew weary of the long stretches of dark highway I would be driving on. I hate living in the country. I was soon out of the bright lights of the city and into the rural areas that lined the highway I had to drive on for more than half an hour. As I reached my first stretch of darkness, there were eerily no other cars around, seeing as though it was a Saturday night. The absence of cars was odd, but not extremely uncommon. As I said, I live in the country, so not a lot of people out here. I snapped out of my thoughts as I heard a clicking noise. Suddenly, I was surrounded by darkness as my headlights clicked off. I felt a sense of panic set in as I immediately reached and turned my headlights back on. My heart raced as I collected myself. I was about 10 minutes into my drive, and nothing else odd happened. Like I said, my car is rather old, so I just summed everything up to being wiring issues that I would have to check out in the morning. However, I started feeling the same sense of dread that I got while in the abandoned house. I decided that I should call someone to take my mind off of everything. I grabbed my phone and, without looking, I dialed my best friend, something I often do on my drive home from my sister's. However, after a few rings, the phone cut off. I at first got upset thinking my best friend had just hung up on me. When I looked down at my phone, though, I realized that I was going through the section of the highway that didn't have any cell phone service. Again, I grew nervous as I white-knuckled the steering wheel, allowing my foot to drop a bit more on the gas pedal, wanting to get home as fast as possible. When I thought I had service again, I decided to try and call my best friend one more time. I grabbed my phone in my right hand, keeping the left firm on the steering wheel. However, I began to feel the wheel moving under my hand as if I was pulling to the right. I dropped my phone back into the cup holder and put both hands on the wheel. I felt the wheel continuing to move under my hands despite my hardest efforts to pull it the other way. I looked and saw that I was riding in the shoulder of the highway, my car moving to almost be off the road. I let out a scream, horrified as to what could possibly be trying to pull my car off the road. Suddenly, the wheel was released, and I almost wrecked trying to overcorrect myself to get back on the road. I was crying at this point, so I, filled with fear that I could hardly see straight, I wanted desperately to pull over, but I was in the middle of nowhere. When I hit a patch of road that was illuminated by street lamps, I checked my rearview mirror out of habit. I froze. There, sitting in my backseat, was the most evil face I could ever imagine. With its pitch black skin, over-exaggerated smile, and wide sunken eyes, it was paralyzing. I let out the most blood-curdling scream as my headlights flickered on and off, and my radio turned on to static as loud as it could go. I felt the steering wheel pulling to the side again. The last thing I remember seeing through the windshield was my car getting closer and closer to the light pole. Followed home. This was only half a year ago. I, female, 19, was walking my dog at around 10 p.m. I live in a pretty okay neighborhood, and it was a Tuesday night. I only have to go about 100, 150 meters, 330, 490 feet to reach the fields, and then I can walk back. To reach these fields, I first need to cross a somewhat bigger road. As my dog was about done, I heard this angry car honk. I looked around and saw that a car that had spotted me immediately had hit the brakes while another car was behind it. The angry car drove on as the car that suddenly stopped parked alongside of the road. He was on the other side of the road, near the place I needed to pass to get back home. A man leaned out the driver's window and tried to have a conversation with me, asking where I always go when walking the dog, and he tried to keep the convo going. I found it odd and just stopped talking. I decided to walk back, so I crossed the road. I heard him getting out of the car, slamming the door, and I walked very quickly. He would have to run to be able to get in front of me, and that would be too obvious. So he didn't run. Instead, he kept an eye on me by the corner of the street, and another car came out of nowhere and drove beside me as I walked into my street. I was in front of the neighbor's house when I stopped walking and pretended I didn't notice the car waiting like 3 feet back. on the road to see where I was going and where I live. I knew that if I would have walked on, going further away from my trusted neighborhood again, I would be in way more danger than I was as I stood in front of my neighbors. I stood there just pretending to check stuff on my phone as the car kept waiting beside me. After one of the longest 10 minutes in my life, the car finally started driving, but extremely slow. I waited incredibly long until the driver was at the end of the street. I ducked behind a parked car, kept my dog close behind it as well, and that way I was able to get into my house without the person in the car being able to see me getting inside my house. No way was I gonna let those freaks know where I live. I don't know what they had planned on doing, but I expect that they'd have kept an eye on my house after that if they knew where I live. I don't feel safe in my apartment anymore. Hello. To start off, I'm a 25-year-old stay-at-home mother of two, and I no longer feel safe in my apartment. When we moved in almost 3 years ago, I put a second lock on our door. Our daughter was only 2 at the time, so we put it on there to keep her in, but now I'm convinced it's helped keep someone out. A few months ago, something very strange happened, and I didn't think too much about it at first, but it slowly made me feel unsafe and very paranoid. Someone has been trying to open our door. The first time it happened, my daughter was not in school yet, and my son was only a few months old. My partner works different hours every day, but usually will let me know around the time he will be home, so I can unlock the top lock so he can let himself in with the key. My daughter was 4 at the time and will usually greet her father at the door when he gets home. This night, it doesn't seem she greeted him, but someone else at the door. I was sitting on the couch with my infant son, and I thought I heard someone try to open the door, but it stopped because it was locked, which is normal sometimes. My partner will try the door before unlocking. My daughter heard that and ran to the door. For some reason, this time she decided she would unlock the door and open it to greet him. She doesn't normally do that. I hear her open the door and then shut the door. I was about to scold her for opening the door by herself when she came in and told me it wasn't Daddy. I was very thrown off by this. She said it in a sweet, innocent voice, like it's just another thing, but I kind of got freaked out. I went and locked both locks to the door, and I asked her if it was the neighbors. We know our neighbors kind of well. She said no, it was a guy. She didn't really get why I was asking her these questions. I told my partner about it. We told her the importance of never opening the door herself again, and now I keep that top locked. I kind of put it out of my mind and wrote it off as a weird accident. A few weeks later, and I felt like I had heard that ever familiar sound of the door trying to open, but being locked again, but just tried to not have it get to me. One night at around 12:30 a.m., the kids were in bed, and my partner and I were watching some late night TV. We heard someone again try to open the door, but this time they then rang the doorbell and lightly knocked. My partner looked out the peephole and saw 3 men. I told him to absolutely not answer it, and he said they left. I went to the window, looked outside cautiously because I didn't want to be seen. But I never saw anyone leave, which made me believe that they may have been sitting in the stairwell waiting for us to answer the door. I felt like calling the police, but wasn't completely sure if telling them some people rang the bell and tried to open the door would really be something they would even care about, so I didn't. I started to become a bit more paranoid and honestly felt a little targeted. I'm sure that sounds silly, but we have lived here for 3 years, and only in the last few months has this been happening. Well, it's still not over. The scariest time is coming up. So about 2 to 3 weeks ago, my partner had another late night. This time it was almost 3 a.m. and we heard a sound. Now our daughter is now 5, but sometimes we'll have nightmares and come out to us. When she does, she usually will jump off her loft bed and run to her door. That night, we heard the sound of what we thought was our daughter waking up and running to her door, so my partner opened her door. He then looked at me strangely, and right when that happened, there was a giant thud at our door and another running sound. We realized then that it was someone running on the stairs outside. My partner looked through the peephole and saw no one. I looked outside and saw no one. That night I took my kids into our room, locked the bedroom door, and pushed something heavy in front of the door. And after having a panic attack where I thought I might actually need medical attention, I silently cried myself to sleep. We got a hold of the landlord the next morning and were told she would try to get someone to patrol the area. Since then, I do not open the door for anyone other than people I know and nothing else. Really happened until today, which is why I'm posting this right now. I had just gotten out of the shower. My daughter is at school, partner is at work, and my son was in his pack and play. I was trying to get dried off when I hear knocking at the door. I'm not expecting anyone, so I'm not going to answer it. I then hear the door try to open. I didn't really know what to do. I'm sitting there naked, but so tired of this, I put a robe on and grabbed a knife, just in case. But when I looked out the peephole, no one was there. I'm looking into moving. I cannot handle being here. I feel very unsafe and violated. That someone's keeps trying to open our door, especially with my kids here. I needed to vent. Thanks for listening. And to the person or people who keep trying to get into our apartment, let's not meet.